Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. and this is the regular meeting of the Kaneland Board of Education. We would like to inform all board meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. At this time, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Board Secretary Julie Orfel is absent, and at this time, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Jackie Bogan as Secretary Pro Tem.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes 7-0. Yes, thank you.
Congratulations.
And Madam Secretary, a roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Kleisner.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Yeah.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
All right, with 7 members present, we have a quorum. Is there anything the board would like to move from consent to new business this evening? No? Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion that we move forward. Excuse me, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, as amended, because we did add, as amended.
Do you want to tell them just what we're going to add?
Yeah, so we're adding, I'm sorry, that's what I spread it out. We're going to add, for the closed session portion, we're going to add a student disciplinary case 5 ILCS 122C9. I apologize. Okay, and so we have the motions, correct? All right, roll call, please.
I'm sorry, we need a motion.
She didn't catch who was.
Okay, then can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved. Second.
Thank you.
And a roll call, please.
All right. Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
All right. Passes. Motion carries 7-0. It is now time for the board/superintendent salutes, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Layden.
Yes, thank you. We do not have any delegated salutes for tonight, but we do have coming up in November, board member appreciation, and then in December, our fall athletics and activities that we recognize from both middle school and high school. So that's what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Fuchs, nothing tonight?
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to move forward with consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda contains the following action items. Approval of accounts payable and payroll for October 2023. Approval of minutes of the October 11th, 2023 regular meeting. Approval of personnel. Approval of the 2022-2023 audit reports for Kaneland, 302 and Fox Valley Career Center. Approval of the school improvement plan upon second reading. Approval of board expenses for the joint annual conference. And the following informational items: the student suspension data report, the Freedom of Information Act report, and the field trip notification. This time I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. All right. Moving right on to public comments. We have a couple people signed up, so I will go ahead and read the this spiel. All right. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. The board does not debate or engage in conversation during this time. I'd like to remind everybody to state your name and village of residence for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. Those who wish to speak are asked to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. And with that being said, we will start with Mr. Stalkup.
first, I attended the CAC meeting the other night, and I just want to commend you guys and thank you guys. That format was really good, probably one of the best meetings I've been to since I started being involved in the district. So just wanted to acknowledge that for everybody. That was a really good meeting, informative, interactive. I think there's a lot of good things that came out of that. So love to see that for other topics, tasks, etc. I did also watch last month's meeting. I was not able to be here, and the SPG conversation at nauseum was lengthy, and I felt like I knew less after hearing that for so long. I know it's on the agenda later, and I'm very hopeful that this is going to end this. It's a disservice to our kids. I've said it before, our district. Our reading scores across the line, it is not setting our kids up for reality in life. There aren't do-overs. If you go to a presentation and you flop it, you don't get to shake the person's hand that you presented to and just say it wasn't my best. I'd like to come back tomorrow if that's okay and try this again. It doesn't work that way in life, guys. You guys all know that, so I don't know why we're trying to teach our kids that. Lastly, I don't know if you know or don't know, but there was a middle schooler that started a survey regarding SBG, and that has gained an awful lot of traction in a very short time. I think last I checked, it was over 700 and some people on the petition, from students to parents to, I don't know because I wasn't the originator of it, but in about a week it gained 700 and it's growing. So I didn't have a chance to check it before I came up here, but clearly there is opposition to standard-based grading. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Mrs. Grosinger.
Tonya Grosinger from Maple Park. So I unfortunately wasn't able to make the CAC meeting. I was sick and homesick with some kids. And I heard it was a really great format, so I want to thank the board for that. I heard many of you were in attendance, so thank you very much. Wish I could have been there, but I got all the notes, so thank you. My comment today is about SBG. I am a part and did attend one of the strategic planning meetings, the one that we had here about a month or so back. I really enjoyed the meeting and I look forward to more this year, but one thing that stood out is still big confusion and just unknown about SBG. And for me, my kids are still little, and as they grow, I worry. I mean, my oldest is in 3rd grade, and I worry about how this is going to affect their grades and stuff going forward. I've been around for 3+ years, and I've heard, unfortunately, nothing but complaints since being part of the district about it, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. And so I really question why we're still so I can't think of any other word, but hell-bent on making this such a huge thing here at Kaneland. I'm not saying it can't work, but it definitely needs to be taken away, re-looked at, and probably brought back in somehow. This is not a hill to die on, in my opinion. It's our kids' future, and that means a lot to all of you, I know, and all of us here. So I really do ask that we take a look at this and take action tonight. I know it says possible, so I encourage you to take action on this. This is just something that, like I said, I've heard nothing but unfortunately bad news about since I started attending these meetings and things 3 or so years ago. One thing that stood out in my mind, Mr. Stelkup mentioned, there's not a lot of do-overs when you get into real life. And I remember in a meeting last year, an administrator said that, if you're a firefighter, they don't just throw you into a fire when you start out, and you get practice and you get to take turns and and that's not how life is. when you are a firefighter and a training for a fire, you get put into those dangerous situations. You don't get do-overs because you messed up. And certain jobs, like a firefighter, mean that you may risk somebody's life, your own, somebody you work with, or somebody who's in an unfortunate position. So I encourage you to really sit back, think about this, and take action later tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So at this time, I'll open it up to anyone else who might want to come and speak. No? All right. Well, we'll move forward with new business.
Yes, I will.
So the first item of new business is the public hearing and approval for a waiver of the school code mandates.
You want me to explain it when you get into the
Do you want me to just go ahead and open the public
Yeah,
hearing?
open the public
Okay.
hearing. I'll explain.
So at this time, we're going to open the public hearing, and we'll explain a little more this process. So it is now 7:11. I don't know if I have to do the gavel. And we will officially open the public hearing on the waiver of the school code mandates for Kaneland CUSD number 302. Dr. Layden, could you please provide more information?
Yes, thank you. If you think this looks familiar, it does, because in July, we had this on a topic. We did the public hearing. The board approved it at the public hearing. The ROE approved it. We sent it off to the state. The state, even though we used the same public notice that we used 5 years ago for this same waiver, the state did not approve it this time. They wanted a clarification that the two half days would be one full day rather than just one day. So they wanted a clarification on that. So nothing changed from July 31st till now. We just needed to change the wording in the public notice, and that's basically all. The other information is the same. We don't do half days typically in the district just because of the geography that we have. So this isn't anything new or different. It's just the state said no. They want us to take it back to another public forum and redo the public notice. So the information is the same. It's just a clarifying from the public notice.
Thank you.
Any board member questions? Thank you.
Okay, well, at this time, we'll invite the public to come up and make any comments for the application of waiver of the school code mandates, keeping in mind the earlier guidelines that I mentioned regarding public comment. All right. Hearing no further comments, I will close the public hearing. I'm going to do the gavel. At 7:13 p.m. All right. So at this time, I'll open it up for discussion against the board on the application and approval for the waiver of school code mandates. Move to call the question. That's a new one. So then we basically just proceed, right?
Yes, you can go ahead and take action.
Okay. So then at this time, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the application for waiver of the school code mandates as presented and direct the administration to submit the application to ISBE for consideration.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
All right, Mr. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky,
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner,
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you. We'll send that back to the Regional Office of Education and the State Board.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The second item of new business is the approval of the 2023 tentative tax levy. Dr. Fuchs, please take it away.
Great, thank you very much. At tonight's meeting, I'm going to go through a lot of information regarding the tax levy. If after the presentation or during the presentation, you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. If I don't have an answer tonight, I'll certainly get it back to you in the future. So the tax levy that we're talking about tonight has to do with next year's budget. That's the 24-25 school year budget. So the first thing I want to tell you is in your memo is the timetable. And you'll notice that tonight we're going to review and adopt the levy, which is required to do at least 20 days prior to the scheduled hearing. Our scheduled hearing will be on December 11th. That is our only scheduled board meeting in December. And so if for some reason bad weather cancels that meeting, we will have to have a special board meeting just to adopt the levy on either the 13th or the 14th. The levy must be filed at both Kane County and DeKalb County clerks no later than Tuesday, December 26th. So that's the timeline. At this point, then, I'm going to flip over to my presentation and go through some data. And hopefully, when we're done, it will help you better understand the memo. So with that, tonight's presentation, I will give you some general tax levy information. I'll talk to you about the process that we use, the data, the assumptions and calculations, and then a more detailed tax levy calendar. So for this, the tax levy is the amount of dollars that we're going to ask for operating funds for next school year. These will help to pay the bills. The Board of Education, I mentioned, has to adopt it no later than the last Tuesday in December. The tax levy in Kaneland brings in our greatest source of revenue. Typically, in a minute, I'll show you, revenue is divided into local, state, and federal. In Kaneland, our local revenue is the greatest source. This money is stable and it's reliable. If you'll recall, not very long ago, the state of Illinois had issues with paying their bills. Those school districts that were relying on the state had a whole lot more problems than we did. We were able to get through that rough time because we depend on our Kaneland taxpayers. I am a Kaneland taxpayer and I'm thankful for the education that my kids had because we relied on our taxes. It is our most stable and reliable. It also arrives early and earns interest. We typically get 2 large tax payments. We get one in June and one in September. We get other tax payments throughout July, August, and October, and sometimes into November, but they're smaller. The big ones come in June and September. And then I invest that money because then we use that money all school year to pay our bills. It will pay for programs, services, operating costs, salaries, benefits, and other expenses for the 24-25 school year. So as I mentioned, we have various sources of revenue. About 75% comes from the tax levy. The other 5% there you see, other local dollars, are from school fees, athletic fees, milk fees, all kinds of local dollars. About 18% comes from the state of Illinois, and about 2% comes from the federal government. The 2% waves or wiggles between 2 and 3%, the 18% somewhere between 18 and 20, the 75 somewhere between 72 and 77 usually, but it generally is very stable in terms of our pie.
And most of that federal funding is probably IDEA money?
Yes.
That's just pass through.
IDEA and title grants.
Oh, title.
Title one, Title 2.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
You got it. So then, the tax levy is full of acronyms. So I want to make sure that you know what they are and what they mean so that you can explain tax levies or send them to me if you have questions from the community. The first part of the tax levy is that you need to know what EAV is. EAV is equalized assessed value. In our tax levy, it's the total value of all of the property in Kaneland School District within our boundaries. That's what we're measuring, our EAV. This most recent year in 2023, the EAV went over $1 billion for the first time. Up until then, it had been under $1 billion. The value of all of our properties is now over $1 billion, and it will keep growing as our property values go up. This year, interestingly, we are expecting EAV to go up about just under 17%. Some of our communities, such as Elburn, is reporting about a 21% increase in EAV, while others are reporting 15-16. So again, that 16.8% is all of Kaneland, all of our properties. The EAV is important because it's used to determine how much money the district is able to collect from the tax levy. There's a formula that we're going to talk about in just a moment called the limiting rate formula, and the EAV is used to determine the limiting rate, which then you can estimate how much money you're eligible for from the tax levy. Some of you are, as you know, residential taxpayers. We all are. And that is the big orange piece of the pie. And so if you take a look at that, you'll notice that about 80% of Kaneland taxpayers are residential. Bless you.
Thank you.
About 18% is commercial and about 6% is farm. The rest of those, railroad and industrial and that, those are all very small and minor. So our big ones are residential, commercial, and then farm. I have a chart that shows you our total EAV history, and you can see that it has gone up and down in the past few years, but primarily it has gone up. And again, this year is more than double what it did last year. So as you know, our housing values have just skyrocketed. This is an indication of that happening. At this point, that's the other thing I want to emphasize. At this point, when the board does their tax levy and approves it, it is based on estimates. Everything we do right now is based on estimates. I won't know the actual until March or April when the county tells us. So everything we do is based on estimates. So that 18% is also an estimate. It could go up a little or down a little. It just depends on how many tax objections there are and how much movement there is between now and March. That formula also includes a portion of new construction. New construction could be a new house. It could be an addition to a house. It could be a garage. It could be anything that adds value to a home or a business, any property within Kaneland. New construction is important because the first year that it's on the tax rolls, you are not limited by the limiting rate. The next year, once it's been on the rolls, then it falls right into line with everything else, and and it has to be within the limiting tax rate. The first year, you get the full value of that new property. So that's why new construction is important, and it's measured separately than existing property values. This is a chart of our new construction growth. You can see that it's hovered around 10 million. It's gone up, 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 and then it came down a little, and now it's climbing again. That just gives you an idea of the new construction that we've had within Kaneland over the last about 8 to 10 years. There is a law, here's another acronym. The law is called PTEL. It's the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law. So I'll refer to that as PTEL, the law. The law says that with PTEL, which is typically called the tax cap law, that the taxing body, that's us, we are limited in how much we can collect on an annual basis. I'll talk to you about the limit in just a moment. Here's what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that the tax cap applies to us as individuals when we get our tax bills. It's the other way. It's the taxing body, the school district. We are limited by how much we can collect on our tax levy, okay? And you might say, well, what is that limitation? The limitation is 5% or CPI, whichever is less. CPI is Consumer Price Index. The CPI is an indicator of inflation. The past 2 years, 22 and 23, inflation for the first time since the tax cap law has been put into place has been greater than 5%. I think in 22 it was 7.3%, and this year it was around 7%. With those, we, the taxing body, are then limited to 5% because the formula says 5% or CPI, whichever is less. So we were limited by 5%. So even though inflation went up 7%, we could only add on 5%. Just something to keep in mind. Let's see. Yep, and I told you that. All right. These are the taxed cap counties. Back in 1994 is when Kane County approved the tax cap, and you'll see that the yellow are mostly centralized around populous areas in the state. All of those counties must adhere to the tax cap law or the PTEL law. I like this chart because it puts into perspective the 3 years that we're working with. So in this formula that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, the CPI year, that's the year of the measurement of that measurement of inflation. For Kaneland, for example, this year we're using the 2022 CPI, which again is capped at 5%. The levy year is now December of 23. The school year that the budget is affected by is 24-25. So in other words, the inflation in 2022, we're finally getting some of that money for our school year in 24-25. So I think that's important that you understand the various years and how that works. I did put a 9-year average on there, and it's up to 2.36. For many years, if you look below, say 21, you'll see that CPI was quite low. So it's really recent that CPI and inflation has just gone crazy, which we all know about because we're all paying more for groceries, we're paying more for cars, for appliances, and all the things that are used to measure that level of inflation. This next chart that I have to show you talks about the formula that we're going to explore. So EAV change, CPI, and tax rate, 3 variables. At the time when your EAV or your property value is flat, your tax rate will be flat. However, there is an inverse relationship between EAV and tax rate. If EAV goes up, which it is currently, tax rate will go down. It's an inverse relationship that is a part of the formula. And currently we are seeing increasing EAVs, and so you're going to see tax rates go down, and you'll see that in just a moment. This is a historical summary, a complete chart of everything that has happened with our taxes here at Kaneland from 2014 to 2023. Please note that the last row is an estimate. Everything else is actual. And what it has is it has all of our EAVs, the new property. Remember, I told you that's measured separately because it's outside of the tax cap for 1 year. Your estimated limiting rate or your actual. Your capped extension. Let's talk about that vocabulary. Your tax levy is the money that you ask for. The extension is what you get. Levy is what you ask for. Extension is what you get. And then the second to the last column is the additional money from your levy each year. And then the extension increase and how much that is. So that's some historical and background data. What I want to do now is take you through the levy process and what we do in order to calculate what we need to ask for. There are 5 steps that we use. first step is that we use the prior year aggregate extension. So the very first number I need to know is what did we get? Remember, extension is what you get. What did we get last year? That's the first number, and I'll show you the formula in just a moment. We take that CPI, remember it's CPI or 5%, whichever is less. Number 3 is where it comes into the estimates. I have to estimate the EAV growth and estimate the new construction. I'll then determine the limiting tax rate, and I'll distribute it into funds. Let me show you how that's done. So to calculate the limiting tax rate, this is the formula that is used. We are taking the prior year extension, multiplying it by 1 plus the lesser of CPI or 5%. This year it's 5%. And then we divide that by the total estimated EAV and subtract out the construction, and that gives us a limiting tax rate. Couple notes that I put at the bottom of this slide. The limiting tax rate is based on the prior year extension. The new property is outside the tax cap. Remember, you get one freebie. And then debt service payments are also outside the tax cap. So this money that we're talking about is only our operating money. All of our debt service payments are determined at the time you sell bonds or refund bonds. So that is determined separately and has nothing to do with this part of the process for the tax levy. Here are the data and assumptions that I'm using in this year's tax levy formula. For the CPI, it was 6.5%, but it is capped at 5%. I don't get a choice. You don't get it. We don't get a choice. That's just the law, the PTEL law. Our estimated EAV change is 18.25%. Could be a little higher, could be a little lower. And our estimated new construction this year is around 14.6 million. Again, that estimate could be a little higher or a little lower. I got those two estimates from our tax assessors in the counties, the Kane County and DeKalb County. So when you plug in the math or the numbers to that formula, you will see that our limiting tax rate for the operating funds is 4.7860 or $4.79 per $100 of EAV. Our estimated total EAV is $1 billion, almost $1.2 billion. Our estimated limiting rate is at 4.78. When you multiply those two numbers together, that's when you can see what your estimated operating extension will be. Extension is what we expect to get. That's $56.955 million. I'll stop there for just a second and see if you have questions. And I can keep going, and then we can do it, ask questions in just a minute. I'm getting close.
I have a
Yep,
question, but
please.
it's kind of a general question. Does the PTEL law apply to just school districts, or is it to munis as well?
Municipalities as well.
Okay.
Yep,
So once a county adopts it, everyone in the county is subject to that.
all governments.
Government.
Yep.
Yeah, forgive me. Yeah.
So, on your tax bill, you've got villages, school district. Sometimes you have a library district. Sometimes you have a fire district, park district. Those governmental units that are approved for a levy, if they're in Kane County, PTEL applies.
Dr. Fuchs, maybe just for comparison, do you remember what last year's estimated total extension was?
I
gonna
do.
be?
It's coming right up.
Okay.
Okay.
We usually do that.
Yep. I will get that for you in 1 second. Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, so let's talk about the bottom line or the impact on the district. So we estimate that we're going to receive about 6.3% more, or about 3.4 million from the 2023 levy than from the 2022 extension. That's quite a bit, and that has to do with that 5%. But if you, and we can talk about this in just a minute, If you remember though, we don't typically get more from the state, just a little bit. This year we got 60,000, and we typically don't get too much more from the feds on an annual basis. So again, as I talked about that pie, our extension or our levy really helps to drive the district. So in order to balance revenues and expenditures, we need to limit our expenditures by that 3.4 million. And we won't know, that's assuming that state and federal stay the same. We won't know those amounts until late summer, after our tentative budget. You might want to ask, how does Kaneland compare to other districts? Because oftentimes boards want to make sure we're okay. Yep, so I put in here a couple charts for you to know that where we are. In terms of tax rates, for the communities and districts that we typically compare to, and we use these districts for a variety of comparisons, taxes being one of them. Yorkville has the highest, and then Kaneland has the second highest. Burlington Central, and then DeKalb in that order. You can see the order. That is for all funds, including the debt service fund. The orange bars on the bottom there, that's your operating levy. And you can see there are three of us that have pretty high or 3 or 4 of us that have pretty high levies. And actually none of us are terribly out of the range. This next chart that I have is EAV per pupil. EAV, equalized assessed value. In this chart, it's talking about the total value of property within Kaneland. And you can see that we have the 4th highest EAV per pupil. And the 3 school districts ahead of us would be Geneva, St. Charles, and Batavia. So when you think of those communities, you know that their property value per pupil is higher than Kaneland's, and then the others are lower. And if you look at the chart, it's a fairly significant drop between Kaneland and the next district, which is Burlington Central, Sycamore, and then Huntley, Yorkville, DeKalb. So, lastly, when you talk about how do we spend money, you can see that our operating expense per pupil is second highest. And that has a lot to do with the geographical size of our district and how much we spend on transportation. If you keep digging into some of this data, you would see that we spend more on transportation because we have to transport kids a longer distance. For example, Geneva School District is only 14 square miles. We are 142 square miles. So big difference. But that's another comparison. And then, Mr. Lawler, you had asked, I think you still asked another question, which I'll get to, but I want to explain this one. So this one is the impact on the tax rate. The operating rate last year was $5.32, and this year we're expecting $4.79. So it's a 53-cent drop in the tax rate. Notice that I've got this divided into 2 sections. You have your operating rate. That is what the levy is talking about. But then don't forget we have the bond and interest rate. And that last year was $1.21, and we're expecting it to go down to $1.04 this year, or minus 17 cents. So our total tax rate, operating plus bond and interest, we expect to be approximately $5.83, or a change of about 70 cents. Some of you are saying, well, that sounds good, and it does. But don't forget, your properties went up in value. So when your property goes higher, you pay more money on the new value. So I've got a couple of sample tax bills on this slide here. And you can see that an average $300,000 home, the tax bill could go down if your value didn't go up. But if your value had a 5% increase, then you would only see about a $350 decrease. And we know that property values went higher, approximately 16 to 18%. So that 5%, you might want to multiply that out. We can use your value and you can figure out your tax bill. You take your property value, you divide it by 3, and then you multiply it by that dollar amount and divide by 100. Again, I can walk you through that at some point. The law last year added a new section to this presentation. We are required to disclose our cash balances. We are disclosing our cash balances as of September 30th, and you can see the funds in each of those balances. Those balances are also contained on each month's treasurer's report. So, yes, I've included the September ones, but you should be watching the treasurer's report each month to know what our cash balances are. The last slide then talks about the levy calendar, and I talked about some of the highlights. Again, I plan to do our levy hearing on December 11th, and then I'll file the levy the next day. Tonight we need to approve the tentative levy. Before we do that, I want to talk one more thing. It's on the spreadsheet that is right before the first slide in your packet. It's a horizontal page and looks like this. If you could turn to that for me, I'd appreciate it. This is a tool that I use to work through how much money needs to go in each fund. And if you look right about the center of the page in the column called weighted extension based on prior year, the formula divides it out. So we know that last year, the first column is what we got in every fund. If you extend this year's formula out, it's the center section of what we expect. So we're again expecting about $56,955,000. I want to talk to you a little bit more about the method. If you look, then the levy amount is a little higher than what we're expecting. That's because, if you recall, everything we're doing tonight is based on estimates. And so I add a little bit of money to the levy just in case if the estimates are wrong. And so the money that I've added is just under about 469,000. That is to protect the board, because if I don't ask for enough, I can't go back and have a second chance and do that. And so that means not only this year would the board be shorted, they would be shorted for every year in the future. Because why? That formula starts with last year's extension. So next year when you do your levy, you're going to start with this year's extension. And if this year's extension is less because we didn't ask for enough, then you will never be able to make that up. However, that number could be 10 million. We could ask for 10 million more. We still won't get 10 million more. You will only get what PTEL allows for. So it's a tricky time of the year to talk about tax levies. Clearly, we need the money because we didn't balance our budget last year. We have lots of capital projects and no referendum to support that. We have lots of people that like salaries and benefits because we are a people business. So we need the money, but yet we have to ask for enough to make sure that we get what PTEL allows. What does that mean? That means I'm asking for about 7.18%. And whenever you ask for more than 5%, you have to do a truth in taxation hearing. But Kaneland has always done the hearing, whether we're at 5% or below or above, because we always give our taxpayers an opportunity to tell us what they think about the levy. So with that, I think that's everything I wanted to share with you, and I am happy to go back and explain. Your question, Mr. Lawler, look at the chart that we were just on that page. The left-hand column, the total is 53.578. That's how much we got last year. And this year we're expecting the 56,955.
Thank you.
Yep.
I didn't feel to do this for the final time.
Sad. Very sad.
And if our fund balance appears to be better than expected, we can always abate, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's a much better way to handle a levy besides doing other things that haven't worked for other districts.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
We didn't abate anything this year. It was
No.
Deficit, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions for Dr. Fuchs? I know it's a lot. Felt like a lot.
Sorry.
Still feels like a lot. It's my third year hearing it.
Well, and I am happy to sit down or answer questions as needed.
So if we didn't approve this tonight, we'd essentially be asking, because I'd imagine you're asking for the maximum. Well, you just explained you're asking for the maximum allowed. So if we didn't approve it, the only other option would be asking for less money, basically. Correct?
That is
There's
correct.
no other option.
Yep.
Okay.
You would tell me how much less, how you want to do it, and that would be the option. We would need to schedule a different board meeting though, because you have to do it 20 days in advance. And our next board meeting, oh wait, we've got one in early November. That would still work. The first meeting in November would still work. I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend what Bob suggested if there's an opportunity, and that would be to ask for the full amount and abate any portion that you don't need.
Can you explain what abate means?
Thank you. Good question. That means give it back to the taxpayers on the next tax bill, whatever portion it is. Please know that you might feel like you're giving a lot back, say, call it $2 million, but then you're going to spread that amongst every taxpayer, and it's going to be a minute number. But for us, $2 million is significant.
Thank you.
Again, a push-pull. I'm sorry.
And is there a deadline for abating?
You know what? I would have to check. I have to believe there is because it has to be before the tax bills go
Yeah,
out,
I believe
but I don't know that date in my head.
Somehow I thought April 1st. Was it?
It has to be, yeah, because you got it.
Yeah, but
I'd
you-
have to check.
Yeah, okay,
Yep. But you're probably close because it has to be before the bills go out.
yeah. It's okay.
Okay. Last chance for any further discussion. Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education adopts the 2023 total tentative operating levy in the amount of $57,425,000.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Sure. Mr. McCauley?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mr. Cook?
Aye.
Passes 7-0. All right. The third item of new business is the review of the public bidding process and contracts. Dr. Fuchs.
Sure, I'm happy to. I put together the rules associated with bidding. This one, what I would tell you is, let me just highlight a couple things. Because I believe part of this process is you wanted to know what contracts are outstanding within the district.
This
So-
topic came as a topic for future agenda.
Yep, thank you. First of all, the bidding law, the threshold is at 25,000, but as of January 1/24, it's going to go up to 35,000. At some point when press comes out with it, we will need and or want, perhaps, to increase our threshold. But that is completely up to the board and a separate topic at this point. There are rules associated with my bid specs, and there is a $50,000 threshold for repair, maintenance, or remodeling, as opposed to just items and services. there are 16, is that right? Yes, there are 16 exceptions to the bidding laws. And so, some of these we adhere to, some of them don't apply, and some of them we still bid even though you don't have to. So it just depends. You can certainly ask any questions. The procedures I put on page 3. We always have to put in a public notice. The bids have to come in sealed so that there's no cheating. Each bidder has to have a certain amount of notice, and we can, when we create the specs, consider references, equipment, experience, etc.
Whether or not there's a bond.
We choose whether or not we have a bond. We typically will do bonds when the project is greater than $1 million. We'll ask for a bid bond to make sure that they're gonna stick with it and that they can afford it, just things like that. Yeah. The bid documents are here. The award of the bid is at a public board meeting. So I do all the behind the scenes. I get the specs ready. I send it out, advertise, all the work. I bring you the recommendation once the bids have been opened. And then the board approves that in a public meeting. At that point, we are looking for the lowest responsive bidder. And we check with that carefully. We check references. We call the attorneys. We make sure we do all the work before we bring it to you in public. On the last page then, one thing I think is important, because early on, say back in about 2010, school boards cannot favor local contractors. A bid is a bid is a bid. Everybody who submits it needs to be considered independently. So we just have to be careful that we're not favoring local vendors. Not that we can't have them, but we have to make sure we've done the process due diligence. We cannot require the bidders to use union labor, but we can require them to participate in apprenticeship programs, and also we are subject to pricing. Thank you. Not minimum wage, but the other one. Prevailing wage. Thank you. Prevailing wage. We are subject to prevailing wage. I apologize. I don't know where it went, but it wasn't there. Here are our current contracts that we have. We bid fuel. That one I've learned, we bid that every year because of the market. Actually 2 times, I did a 3-year contract. One time we won big, the other time we lost big. It's too stressful. So I do that every year, and then that way you get a price and you're good to go for the year. Special ed transportation, we do that every 3 years. Snow removals every 3 years. Fire system inspections, garbage and recycling, athletic training, natural gas, electricity, cafeteria, food and supplies, the night and weekend security, all and custodial. Those are all 3 years. We have external auditors, 3 years. Health insurance broker, 3 years. The copiers with Canon, we have a 5-year lease on that. At this time, 5 years is the most you can do. Any of these 3-year contracts that you have, you can extend them 2 years without going back out to bid. The law allows for that. We typically, in February, I'll bring you the list of things that are due and get your approval to move forward. Through March and April, I'll do that. We'll set up the bids, have them all come in, and then come April usually, I'll bring all the approvals and they'll go in consent, because unless if we have a problem or a question, it's pretty cut and dry. Typically, we have our contract start on July 1, which is our fiscal year, to June 30th.
I note that there is no contract, under current contracts for telecom or data services.
That is correct. And that is because it is one of the exceptions. It is exception number 7. And oftentimes, Mr. Wolf can get contracts for less money when he works with vendors that are known to school districts. And there are some. You have to also make sure that the vendor knows your systems and that they can service them. A lot of times people, vendors will sell you things, but then have a hard time servicing. And we are very fortunate in Kaneland. Our technology works well, and that's under Mr. Wolf's leadership that I'm very pleased with that.
Does the state of Illinois have any provisions for having to rotate auditors every so often, or
They don't.
that's kind of interesting?
It is, because when I first started, I think we used our first auditor for about the first 10 years, and then we just recently started bidding them and rotating. And now this last one, if you'll remember, there was only one that bid on it because all the auditors are busy. They can't get enough help, similar to the rest of the world. And so it's different.
So they've
It's a
been
different world.
they've been bid, but just Lauterbach keeps coming back,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah. So
And then I noticed legal services aren't on here. Can you give us some insight as to what our contract looks like for legal services?
we have had the same legal company or firm for many years. And that's primarily to provide us with the historical information. And I know that we have a positive working relationship with our current firm. I believe that the boards in the past have said that if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And I think that's a part of it as well. I think you heard Mr. Carl Addison was here, and that we've been with them for quite some time. I know that their pricing is competitive, and so we've not ever had a need to change. I don't know, Dr. Layden, you work more closely. Is there anything that you could add to provide?
No, it was the same information from Mr. Otteson when he came. He shared that, and as a result, I think some of the keeping with that firm is there's not like always a easy start and stop time like an audit. It starts and then here's the next season, whereas there are always regular ongoing matters with our law firm. So because of that experience, we have tended to keep with them and kept that same firm throughout. And I would agree with Dr. Fuchs, what she shared as far as the billing. The billing has been as consistent, if not a little bit less, when we have had to go to other firms for other work that we've had.
And every now and then, like this TIF, we do use outside auditing firms. We used one for negotiations a few years back. It was a couple negotiations ago,
2015.
and we were happy to have Addison Brits come to the table after that experience.
So is it an open-ended contract then, is what you're saying? Okay, so there's no,
Yeah.
okay.
So I brought this up initially partially because I wanted everyone to understand the contract process, and also for us to get a good look at it. But I feel that we should at least, I'm not saying that Addison is lacking in any way, and Lord knows I've seen Maureen in action. I think she does a good job, but I think, in an effort to do its best for the district and be transparent, we should at least bid it out and see what options are out there. My opinion, just for transparency, to make sure we're doing everything on board, above board, I should say. So I don't know. It was that something where I suggest it and then we see how everyone feels, or how does that work?
Yeah, that would be, that would be suggesting it, and then we'd also have to talk through what the timeline would be. As you know, we have some topics with negotiations that'll be starting shortly, and we work with that firm. If there is the inclination for us to go out to bid, we would like to do some research and come back with a timeline that would make the most sense for the Kaneland board.
Yeah, and with that being said, I definitely going into negotiations real soon. I would prefer to potentially wait until after, but I would like to at least get a feel for what's out there and make sure we're making the right decision for the taxpayers. So, I guess my suggestion would be, hey, let's do this. Let's put together a timeline, but let's focus on post negotiations, post KEA negotiations, and then at least see what's out there. That way we know, we're doing everything correctly.
Okay. We want to make sure that as you brought that up and we've talked through this, that we have a consensus on that, like we typically would do, to make sure that there's a consensus to move forward with us looking at a timeline and bringing that back to the board.
And we just recently did this with the insurance brokers too. It was something that was brought up, and I think we did our due diligence, and I think it was a good thing for us to do. It helped us to understand a little bit better the process, and so I'm for it too.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you mentioned when you mentioned, Dr. Fuchs, that you do a lot of the work on the back end, we were with the insurance broker, so Mrs. Simmons and I were on that committee, and so they did have board representation on the committee discussing the process and looking at all the vendors, and so we were actively involved to that extent. We were able to bring feedback back, and so I don't think it hurts. And again, I'm not coming out and saying, hey, we don't like Addison, or we have a problem with Marine. I'm just saying we should have a contract. The history is, I just feel like it's something that we should do for the district and the taxpayers.
And to add to that, I think it helps us as a board too. Like you said, they've been with us for so long that the history back of why we chose them, those people are not here to speak anymore. So I think it would help us too. Like, we can speak to the health insurance if anybody was asked, and I think the lawyers too. And just like, again, I have nothing against Maureen and that. She's done phenomenal for us. But I think hearing about them presenting themselves again to us would educate us. And I think that's a benefit for us.
How far back does the contract go, and when was the last time?
For the attorney?
Yeah, like when we've seen a contract, or how long has that been?
It was the 90s.
Yeah.
90s was the last time.
We'll
Yeah,
probably
I think
do.
from a process standpoint, it's not a bad thing, right? When we went to the auditing, we've done this a couple of rounds now. I remember 2 rounds ago I was on that, and it was enlightening not just for us, but also for the auditors, right, at the time, right? We had some issues, and they were like, oh, we didn't even know those issues existed, right? So, like, there was that too, right? So, I don't disagree. I do think we have to be strategic about negotiations and all that kind of stuff, because I will say this, having Maureen at the table during negotiations is huge. She knows the contract, she knows the history, she knows everything about it. And I think she does a good job of keeping it fair and balanced, right? Like, she's not, she definitely hears what the other team says and can process that very well. So I think that's an important piece.
Is the board interested in entering a contract with Addison Brits, or you're interested in doing the bidding process to see what else is available? Because with the negotiations coming up, you can work with Addison Brits, and it's not Brits anymore. Sorry, just call it Addison. Thank you. You can work with that firm just to solidify a contract, which is what I hear you saying. I just want a contract. I'm confident that they would sit down and work with the board for that. But I don't know if that's what you want, or if it's more what Mr. Gonzalez is asking for, which is to go through the process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of both, because I would like to see, I'm looking at all these contracts, there's start dates, there's end dates, and if we haven't done anything since the 90s, I would like to see something where we stand. And because we've been with them for so long, if we want to bid or look what else is out there in comparison to what their pricing is. And I understand there's a history. You don't want to tear that down if they've been helping us out, but it doesn't hurt.
Thank you.
We've had 4 people speak in favor of it, but I just want to make sure we get an official, at least 4. When you're ready.
To lay it out there, we're looking at the bidding process and the contract, since you laid out 2 different options. So that's the root of what I wanted, was to get the bidding process out there and see what's out there and make sure we're making the best choice for the district. So are we in favor of bidding and contract?
With the caveat that we have some kind of timeline that protects us.
Yeah, can we
Yes.
add that in there?
Yep, we can bring that back. We'll bring that
I
back.
just want to make sure of that.
Yeah. And there's never a great time, but we'll find the best time.
Sure. Okay, so there's no formal recommendation. We have our takeaway, so I
Yes.
guess we can move on to the next item of
Thanks for
business.
putting this together.
Yes, thank you. Okay. She's gonna lose her voice tonight.
She's chuckling because I think it's going right back to her.
All right. The fourth item of new business is the discussion of budget planning for 2024-2025. Dr. Fuchs.
Thank you. Now that you have approved the tentative levy and that the audit for last year is done and this year's budget is done, it's now time to look forward to next year. And so in order to do so, what I'd like to go through with the board is some historical information as well as assumptions. The word assumptions in this example is what I will be using to develop your 5-year financial projections. The assumptions we do tonight can be changed once I present the plan to you, but I need a place to start. So what I've done is I've given you the most, most used assumptions and a recommendation. So we do need to go through each one to make sure that the board understands what it is, how it will be used, and then make sure that you agree with my assumptions. Before I do that, I want to point out to you, page 8, I have given you what I consider to be the report card, and I think that's really important. We will be using this to share with the association. This is a 5-year look back of budget to actuals. And so what I want to point out to you is in one particular year, something may be high or something may be low. I'm looking at this page right here, horizontal. We may be positive or we may be negative, but I want to talk about the 5-year averages. The first section are the budgeted revenues to actual revenues. And if you look over on the right-hand side, you can see our 5-year average is about 100.2%. That means on over 5 years, and you can see some years are over 100, some years are under 100, but over 5 years, our average revenue to budget is 100.2%. So just a hair over is what we've come across. The budgeted expenditures to actual expenditures, if you look over 5 years, you can see that that's 98%, 97.6. So that means we spend about 98% of our budget each year, and that's an average over 5 years. Then what you have to do is to compare actual revenues to actual expenditures. In a year where actual revenues are greater than expenditures, your fund balance will grow by that amount. In a year when your expenditures are greater than your revenues, your fund balance will go down by that amount. And if you take a look, this last year, we had a deficit of about $2 million. About $1 million of that was planned because of the extra capital projects that we've been trying to get done. But if you look at the 5-year percentage, our 5-year percentage of actual revenues to actual expenditures is just over 99%. So that means over 5 years, we take in whatever amount we're taking in, and we use about 99% of it. So again, I can assure you that when you approve the entire tax levy, that is because it's needed. Are there any questions on this 5-year information? Because I'm pretty proud of it for the board.
Yes, I mean, I would go ahead.
Is the CapEx baked into the O&M?
Yes, it is.
I was just gonna say, congratulations to it, because I think it's good that every tax dollar is going to students. Like, that's what we're doing, right? That's a good thing. So we're doing what we're supposed to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so back to our assumptions then. Let's start on page 2. There are 4 revenue assumptions that I need to get your consensus. The first one is the CPI. So again, what I'm gonna do is I have a software tool that I put this information in, and it gives us data out. I've got the last 5 years CPIs. The average is 3.12%. It has gone up. It's currently running at 3.7%. Right now, my recommendation is to put in 3% for all years in the model. And then once January comes, we can update it when we know what the next year's CPI is. If we go too low on this, it won't give us enough money. If we go too high, we're going to have to cut. So we want to do something in the middle. And for me right now, a 3% seems to be reasonable. Again, it's a starting point, but I will start wherever the board wants, and we can go from there. Any feedback on the CPI? Okay, I'm going to keep going. New EAV growth. I've got 5 years of data. The average is 10.1 million over 5 years. We know that it's going up a little higher. My recommendation, go ahead and use 9.5 million for all projected years, and that'll protect us from the years when it may drop off. Because it won't always, well, I can't say it won't. It hasn't always stayed high. It has fluctuated. So I'm thinking 9.5 on the EAV. For these two particular levers, I will call them, or revenue sources, I also put in a sensitivity figure. For example, if we put in 3% in the model and the actual comes out to be 4%, which is 1% more, that would mean the district would get approximately 540,000 extra money or extra dollars. So it's a +1 -1 percentage at about 540,000. CPI has a much higher impact than that new construction. Every $1 million of new construction means about $48,000 in revenue to the district. I'm going to keep going. We get what's called CPPRT, Corporate Property Replacement Tax. It used to only always be around 350,000. Most recently, it has jumped like crazy. Now we're over 900,000. So a 5-year average is around 582,000. My recommendation is to use 600,000 for all years. I just rounded.
Cause that jump.
Yeah. The economy, the inflation. So there was a law that got put into place, and I'll see if I can describe it to you.
Yeah.
It's, if you remember, I don't know if you'll remember. You have to be a little older. I don't know if you're old. But there were businesses that were in place when this law went into effect, and they still have to pay what they paid back then. And so it's kind of like a carryover or leftover on corporate personal property replacement tax.
Okay.
So with businesses, for personal property, you used to have to pay taxes, and I don't think you have to anymore. But these folks that still have them when the law went in still do. So it's a leftover. And so on businesses that have to pay this, they have to pay more because tax rates went up or taxes went up.
It's
For
I years, I just usually chalk this number as it's not that much.
Well, it was insignificant for so long
Yeah,
for us, and now it's jumping.
so not gonna pay attention to that.
I can, in the Friday update, I'll give you the more technical
Okay.
definition of the CPPRT,
I might
so
have to
that
go-
what I just described.
I might have
sounds
to sit down and talk to you again, like
Yeah.
back in the day.
So does that mean we, as a district, received $990,000 from CPR?
We do.
CPRT? We did that for last fiscal
Yes.
year. for
Yes.
This school year, current school year.
This was for 22-23. I think in this year, we're looking at about 730,000. So, yeah, 730. We looked that up.
Okay.
Yeah. We get that estimate in the middle of summer after the tentative budget
Yep.
from the Illinois Department of Revenue. If you go to the Illinois Department of Revenue website, you can look up personal replacement property tax, and you can see on there what we've gotten in the past and what others get. Because we don't have a lot of businesses,
Yeah.
we don't get a lot. So a lot of school districts saw a giant jump in this. By the way, CPPRT is considered a local revenue because it comes from your corporate property taxpayers in the district. State and federal revenue has pretty much been the same, so I'd like to keep it the same and use 11.5 and 1.8. Please note the ESSER money we took out of this because that was one-time monies, so that's already taken out. Those are the four revenue assumptions that I'll be using when I bring you the projections. So you'll hear that information again. And if at some point you don't like it or want something changed, it's very simple to do so. Not a big deal. This is a starting point. The expenditure assumptions, there are 5 of them. The first one is the staffing. Whenever I do the financial projections, I always keep staffing flat. And then from there, we add what is recommended by the administration. I will probably show you 2 different models this year, one with a flat and one with some administrative recommendations, because over the summer, the cabinet went through the staffing plan and have identified positions that we would like to increase. And so I'll go through that with you when we have the projections. In addition to increasing the FTEs or the number of staff, there are the salary increases. Question, Ryan?
So based on negotiations with the teachers' contracts going on right now, will that affect what your potential expenditure or what you'll budget for expenditures for next year?
Yep.
Okay.
So what I'm recommending is that I put a placeholder in the model of 5%.
Okay.
That 5% is CPI, and that way it's equal to CPI. If we end up settling for more than CPI, then I would go back, and actually I would do it during negotiations. I re-put in whatever number we're at to see what the impact is.
Yeah.
If it's less than CPI, then I would fix that as well and tell you the impact of the lower. Many years ago, for this part of the process, I would use 0 and flat. And what that does when you do that is it gives you a dollar amount of which you have over all of your expenditures. So it kind of tells you what you've got to deal with or to bargain with. And that's a strategy that we can talk about as well. Probably not here, but when it's time.
Okay.
Yep. The speed contract still has a couple years remaining. So for the speed contract, I will, in the financial projections, I'll actually plug in the percentages that are in their contract. And so then that way it's a known number. Once the KEA contract is settled, I'll plug in all of those numbers as well, and you'll be able to see your 5-year model at that point. New curricular materials adoption. Each year we set aside a certain amount of money for the curricular rotation. Typically that amount of money has been $400,000. One year we didn't have enough, so we only used $300,000. Other than that, we've been able to keep that at $400,000. At some point, the board may want to consider increasing that. I am confident that our curriculum department would appreciate it. So, there you go. Affirmation. Technology. Each year we set aside money for technology. it's gone up and down. And then Mr. Wolf got the large technology grant of 1.5 million this past a year and a half or so ago. During that year, we lowered it, and so his budget needs more money because everything is more expensive. So I am moving it back closer to what it was in 2017-18. Back then, he had 730,000. Right now, he's got 530. I'm recommending a 650,000 placeholder because he's going to need some replacement devices and servers. We had to buy Infinite Campus. There's just a number of things that we need to make sure we've got adequate funds for that. The next one are our school buses. I typically recommend that we replace 5 buses each year with 1-year-old buses. That runs us a little over 475,000. We are looking at a variety of different buses. We're talking about maybe gasoline buses, but if we do that, we have to get a different gas tank. So I don't know if we want to do that. So we're starting those conversations. I do know our salesman is pushing us. He only has 3 diesels that he can give us that'll be 1-year-old. So we may have to buy a couple new. It's a little early. All I want to do right now is talk about a placeholder for the dollar amount. If we end up spending more, we can add it. If we spend less, we can adjust it accordingly. I'm recommending the 475, but know some of those conversations with buses will be forthcoming. Capital projects, the board has already talked about that for the 24-25 school year. We've got the 1.385 million estimated. And then my recommendation is for all future years to use $1 million. That seems to hold us until we can get some significant revenue to take care of some of our serious capital needs. Our Ignite Academy, when I pulled this memo up from a couple years ago, it was in there as being planned to open on August 23rd or August 23, and we did open. And so that's great. As we expand into the 9th grade, please know that there will be some expenses related to staffing and materials. So those are the initial financial projection recommendations that I've got in here. Our goal is to bring the board the financial presentation at the 2nd meeting in November, which is 1 meeting earlier than we would typically do it. However, with negotiations starting, I want to make sure the board sees it before everybody else. I do have a recommendation if you want to just start there, or if you want me to change anything at this time, that discussion as well.
Does anybody have anything discussion? I'd just like to add, in the short time I've been doing this, I've come to find that Dr. Fuchs is relatively conservative when she's projecting, which leads to, and she has a good pulse on what's going on, which leads to that near 100% on the budget to actuals. So we're excited for Jackie to come on, but you know, she'll show her, because that comes with experience and knowledge of the district. So you know, when she recommends this sort of thing, I usually am fairly trusting in that she knows what she's doing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. At some point, we're gonna have to, or maybe not have to, I want to have a conversation about curriculum and maybe increasing that funding, I think, at some point. I don't know if it's the year to do that, but at some point, I think we need to think about it.
What I would say, if I could recommend, is start here.
Yeah.
And then when you see where we're at, determine if you have extra, how you want to allocate it.
Okay.
You may have some competing interests this year.
Yeah.
That might be important.
Okay. Good. Or good.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further discussion?
Really quick, back to Ignite. You were just touching on it, right?
Yeah.
So it's still not fully clear to me. From our district, how much do we pay, and is there, because do we fit, or do we foot 100% of the bill for Ignite, or is there other revenue streams that do come in from other districts, or is it direct? Is there like direct tuition from students who attend or utilize Ignite, or how does that work?
Sure. Ignite is just like any other Kaneland school. So there is no tuition. There are registration fees,
Okay.
and those pay for it. We do not collect tuition from any other districts to help offset the costs because it is only primarily for Kaneland students. And we did pay for the majority of it. However, we did have a couple small grants to help offset some of the costs. The grants, the one I'm thinking of was around 15,000, and there may have been some of our federal money that was used to purchase some of the materials, but the materials that were purchased would have been purchased if those students were in Ignite or if they were in any of our other schools. So they were purchased for the students regardless of where they went.
Is that registration fee a different cost than, say, the harder or Johnson?
The students that are in grades 3 through 5 in Ignite pay the elementary registration fees. The students that are in grades 6 through 8 at Ignite pay the middle school registration fees. They're exactly the same.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is it possible to? Oh, go ahead. Is it possible to see figures? Because I think some people in the community have concerns regarding Ignite and the expenses. Is it possible to see in excess? Because I know when we were doing the staffing plan with Dr. Atkins, there were bodies moved from other, so it wasn't, we added what, I think 3, if I recall, 3 additional, maybe that's a
I
little
think
light
there's been a couple more at this point.
initially. But we moved, teachers from
We
other
did move
schools,
quite
so
a
we
few.
didn't add a ton of total head count. And so is there any way you can show us what the additional expenditure would be for the Ignite so we can see?
I sure can. We've been working on that and getting it tweaked. Let me plan on when I can bring that to you.
Okay.
Okay. I will say before the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
To
Okay.
add to that, could I maybe add to that? I would like to also see, now that it's up and running, right? What's the cost difference if we had to install it and put all the teachers back? Is there a cost difference in doing that or keeping the teachers there? Right? Is there really a cost difference now that it's up and running?
We'll be able to see some of that
Okay.
after the end of this first fiscal year. On the Illinois school report card, there is a section called site-based expenditures.
Oh, okay.
And after this fiscal year, we will be required to report expenditures just like we have in the past for our other schools. Ignite will be one of the schools that will be on the list, and you'll be able to see the comparison between Ignite and our other Kaneland schools. And in terms of expenditures on that Illinois school report card. So some of it is a little premature
Sure.
because it's budgeted right now. It's not actuals.
Sure.
You're a hair over a quarter of the way through the fiscal year.
Yeah.
You're probably about 33%. And so I can give you the startup costs, some of the budgeted monies. I can show you what I can show you, but the best comparison will come at the end of the first fiscal year.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, feedback? Okay, well, at this point, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education directs the administration to use the above recommendations as assumptions when planning the 2024 through 2028 5-year financial projections.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski,
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner,
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
You had to know that that's not my last. Okay.
That's a nice run.
Moving right along, we're going to go to the 5th item of new business, which is the discussion of the Kaneland referendum information. It says Dr. Fuchs, could you please? Switching it up.
Happy to do it. As you know, on September 11th, well, going back to April, on the referendum that did not pass back in April, so we wanted to make sure we gathered information, gathered feedback, brought that back to the Board of Education. September 11th, you'll recall that E.O. Sullivan was here, shared some post-election analysis, laid out the 5 key indicators they believed were symptomatic in the referendum not passing, and as a result, shared that they would have a future recommendation for the next round, should the board choose to move forward. It was either March of 24 in the spring or next November, so this time, a little later than this, but this time next year for the general election. And so we heard back from E.O. Sullivan. We met with them, had a quick meeting. They did share that their recommendation followed primarily what they shared with us when they were here, that it is in November, and primarily because that November timeline gets anywhere between 70 to 75% of our local turnout, local voters, and so felt it would be important to bring it back to a larger subset of the population to go back to see truly what the Kaneland community wants to do and believes. So with that, wanted to share and just see where the board was, because again, it was a previous board that had a lot of that dialogue, 4 or 5 meetings that led up to that, led up to the final decision. Wanted to see here now with that recommendation for next November, not to necessarily finalize anything tonight, but just the only recommendation is to finalize that, give us authority to go back and start survey work, feedback work, look at possible projects. You've heard several pieces of feedback about involvement, engagement from E.O. Sullivan and others. So we're just looking for that direction, if this board wants to and has the will, to direct us to go back for more information to bring back to the board. Maybe timeline, steps, survey, feedback groups, all of that to bring back to the board for more information. And again, the board's not making a decision to go to referendum tonight, not making any final decisions, just giving us the direction to go and start to engage with stakeholders for feedback.
So it's administration doing the feedback or doing the surveys and stuff, but who's developing the surveys? Are we going to like talk about some of the questions that we want to ask and we give that to you, or is it something that you and like Dave is going to do?
Yep.
What does that look like?
What we wanted to do was, before we got the cart in front of the horse at all, find out where the board was inclined to do that, because rather than do the work and find out from the board whether it was the March or the November or not at all, wanted to get that feedback first. So that is all that will be under construction and brought back to the board for more dialogue, more conversation. And as I shared previously, there were 4 or 5 meetings that led up to that, 4 or 5 major discussions that the board had. So this board will have that same opportunity to do so.
Any discussion?
So does this mean the administration will engage with E.O. Sullivan or engage with the community?
We do not have a contract that extends with E.O. Sullivan. So as we started, it would be us initializing it with teachers, because one of the things they shared about was staff feedback. They talked about parent feedback. Those would be some of the loops that we would start with. We'd look at the projects. We'd look at what the expenses are, as they talked about the 5 significant factors from their memo that we used on the 11th. We'd look at all 5 of those factors that they believe that led to the unsuccessful referendum, and we would seek to remedy all of those to have more information. And some of it is public forums, some of it's feedback, some of it's opportunities to ask questions and just talk through what the process would look like.
So initially, there's no cost to us to just kind of
Correct.
put the feelers out there and kind of see how everybody's feeling about it. Some of the conversations I got to have with people in the community, there's a little bit of a trust issue going on right now. So I think the opportunity to have some dialogue, if it's a town hall meeting, like we did at CAC the other night, which was really cool, great experience to get to sit and have some really well-crafted questions and then write it all down and have a little group project on it. I thought it was very valuable to get good feedback from, the community and have some of these difficult conversations. But I also want to make sure we're not throwing a bunch of cash at it right up front until we get a little bit better understanding of where everybody else is with it.
Right now, it would just be a time commitment, not a financial commitment at all.
We got plenty of that.
A lot of board meetings before
I
November.
nominate Adam.
No, without committing to anything, I think this is a great way to proceed. And I think, given, as Board Member Kleisner mentioned, given the experience we had with the CAC, was that we were able to get a pulse for, how to effectively do something like this. So I feel like we have a firm foundation for that. So like I said, I wouldn't want to commit to anything other than receiving information, but I'd be up for it for sure.
That's what we're gonna do.
That's why I was kind of asking, will it be more like what we did at CAC or just a flat survey again? Because I think a flat survey does not give us what we need. The conversations we had were so engaging the other night, where there was a lot of comments that were made that some of the community members didn't realize the connections, and we were able to connect dots for them. And they were like one of the questions, it's why do we do what we do? Like the village should be growing. The villages aren't growing. So is that our fault? And I was like, well, let's have that talk, connect that. Question is, why don't we build a new high school? Connecting those dots. There's some basic things that are, why can't we, or why can we, or what logistically, what does that mean? I think we own a lot more information than we shared to our community. And so I think that to me feels engaging and feels more like better versus than just another survey being sent out. So that's kind of why I was asking what was step one,
For sure, and we have already, once the board gives the recommendation for us to do that, as you know, the CAC meeting was scheduled for other topics.
Yeah.
These are this and other topics we'll bring back to CAC for December and January. So already have an agenda item ready to go.
Any further discussion? All right, with none being heard, I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education I will entertain a motion, that the Board of Education directs the district administration to engage with stakeholders for feedback regarding a possible November 2024 referendum.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Sure. Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Moving right along, we'll move to item 6, which is the approval for one FTE for registered nurse at the Kaneland High School. Dr. Layden, please take it away.
Yes, thank you. As you know, we've shared from the last staffing plan and throughout the school year. Dr. Atkins, you can head up there. Other hard to fill positions and what is going on in the staffing. Dr. talked about that earlier as far as audits and people giving bids. We are also struggling at times to fill positions, and so wanted to bring this request to the board and with some of the background that comes with that. Dr. Atkins.
So there are a couple of overlapping factors here, and I want to make sure I go through each piece so that the board can understand what's happening. But I wanted to start by first saying that this year we were able to start the school year with only one unfilled State Board of Education certified position. So in other words, one unfilled teaching position. That was the certified school nurse. So in a year where we had to hire special ed teachers, social workers, psychologists, speech language pathologists, I just need the board to know that the administration, the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the support staff that participated in interviews did a fabulous job finding, hiring, onboarding, mentoring a whole ton of new teachers. So we've done a great job with that. But for certified school nurses, that's a different factor because they are a rare and unique type of teacher in the state of Illinois right now. So in the world of nursing in schools, there are building nurses who hold a registered nurse, licensed practicing assistant, or licensed practitioner's assistant, certified school nurse, or certified CSN, certified school nurse certificate, CNA, certified nursing assistant, all sorts of different types of acronyms, right? So we're going to go through a bunch of those. But the building nurse position, the person that you send a student to when they're ill, typically has a medical licensure, CNA, LPN, RN. State law does not require that they have anything on one hand, but on the other hand, in order to distribute medications to anyone, you need to have a registered nurse license. So they don't require it, but they do, which is odd. In addition, school districts have to have a certified school nurse who is certified through the State School Board of Education with a professional educator's license specializing in school nursing and an RN license. Those certified school nurses, CSNs, they are the ones responsible for conducting health histories for students that might need an IEP or a 504, and also coordinating what we call HCPs, healthcare plans. So you might have a student with a medical need who has no special education services needs, but may have a medical condition that requires certain accommodations. So those would be
504s.
correct. So those would be the staff that call a family, call a doctor. What does this student need? How does what they need medically impact their learning here at the school? And they participate in the IEP process. A certified school nurse has additional schooling past their baccalaureate. They have an internship. They have to pass a subject matter test that has some to do with the medical field itself, but a lot to do with special education law, processes, rights of children and parents, those kinds of things. CSNs are incredibly hard to find. They are the most rare of the most rare. So when we think of specialized staff, they are absolutely the most difficult to find. Our structure in this district has been set up where we have a nurse in each school that handles the walk-in services, the ill child, the student who has a tummy ache, those kinds of things. And then for each grade span, we have a certified school nurse. One for the elementary, one for the middle school, one for the high school. Okay, so anybody that has any of those very unique needs will work with the CSN while the building nurse is handling the traffic that comes through the nurse's office from the school on a day-to-day basis. The elementary certified school nurse retired at the end of last year, and that position has been unfilled since she retired. We have interviewed every single candidate that comes up. We've extended job offers. We've had people accept job offers and then rescind them later. For a variety of reasons, we've had people ghost us after being offered positions. We've had people not show up for interviews when we've contacted them. I have cold called most of the CSNs that are actively working in the area. We have contacted retirees. We have contacted agencies. Even the agencies that specialize in finding nurses for schools are having a hard time finding nurses. So we've had difficulty filling that position. It's remained unfilled. In addition, our high school certified school nurse gave us a resignation, which the board approved tonight in the personnel report. And her last day is Wednesday. She's leaving to go into the private sector. Our middle school certified school nurse has been on a leave and unavailable to us and is returning. If not,
She's back.
She's back. So she's back, but she's been out. So we have had a vast gap in our ability to provide services. We are currently working with all of our local universities. I've been talking to department chairs. I've been talking to provosts. We've been posting on alumni job boards, nursing job boards, hospital job boards, you name it. We've been doing all sorts of things. We've been working with the Regional Office of Education and the State Board of Education to find alternative pathways to certified school nurse licensure. We've been doing all sorts of things to try to fill not only the existing elementary CSN position, the now anticipated high school CSN position, to make sure that all of this work gets done. How does this lead to tonight's request for an RN for the high school? With the way the licensure works, the building nurse that we have at the high school, who was the best available candidate that we've been able to find and a terrific addition to our staff, has a CNA license and not an RN license yet, although we are encouraging her on a daily basis to finish those last couple of classes, right? So for now, we're unable to distribute medications whenever the high school CSN is absent, or starting on Wednesday when she's no longer here. We do have a plan where the administration, the three of us, the high school administration, can sit in there, because apparently the state feels that I'm more capable of delivering middle day medicines to students than our building nurses, which is, again, interesting to me. It's the way the law works. But we sit in there and supervise the CNA who's in the office to deliver the medications. I can tell you right now that the probability of me being able to fill a registered nurse position is higher and more likely than my ability to hire a certified school nurse. Okay, so we, as a way to make sure that we can maintain the services offered through the nurse's office at the high school, are requesting an additional FTE to hire a registered nurse to be at the high school to help with those daily obligations for medication distribution, student monitoring of various chronic conditions and that kind of thing, to make sure that we can operate the nurse's office and provide those services to those students. At the same time, we would keep the 2 CSN positions open. We're actively searching. We're actively talking to a variety of people. Starting November 6th, the week of November 6th, I have a retired CSN from one of the Naperville school districts who will be working for us 2 days a week. But again, that's not every single day. So we're working on a whole variety of different things. We have some remote services that we can potentially take advantage of. So CSNs who used to live in Illinois that have moved out of state, but will be able to do health histories remotely and that kind of thing. So for this year, I have a concern that we'll be patchworking some of the CSN work, but we also have the immediate day-to-day need of having a registered nurse at the high school for the medicine distributions. We do have registered nurses at all of our elementaries, the middle school and KIPLA, so those are covered, but then we would need this RN for the high school. So that's what we're here asking for today. The budgetary impact of that, our placeholder for speak staff is about $30,000. So it would depend on who they are, whether they take insurance and some of those kinds of things. But it is a need. It's a need that we have right now. The board has always asked in the past, is this a must do or a would like to do? This is a little bit in between. I don't know how else we'd be able to administer medications as of Wednesday. So definitely something we need to do.
Dr. Atkins, this
Yeah.
is probably tangential to the conversation, but is there a way we can incentivize or help those other nurses go to finish their degrees or finish whatever certifications they need so that they can help us satisfy this role?
We do have the opportunity for support staff to access the waivers, the available waivers that we get from NIU as far as direct subsidizing that degree attainment. That'd be something that have to be bargained.
So I'd imagine our largest competition is the private sector, right? That's really why we're seeing a shortage.
Mhm.
And the pay grade is bound by the speak contract, correct? So in terms of incentivizing, not only for them to further their education, but also incentivizing them financially, we're bound by that contract.
As an example, the most recent not yet certified CSN, but one who we could get a provisional certification called an ELS, an educator license with stipulations. And that'd be where we'd work with the ROE, we'd write a letter to them, they would approve it on a temporary basis until the person finished their internship, and they'd be able to do their internship with us while simultaneously being on our payroll. We maximized what we could offer that person based on their years of experience and their degree, which was just under $70,000, and that would represent about a 50% pay cut for that particular person. She is an OR nurse, and to us, it's a lot of money. To someone making that kind of money in the private sector, it's not a lot of money. And so there is definitely a discrepancy between what the market demands in the private sector and what public schools, and not just Kaneland. This isn't a Kaneland issue. The CSNs are probably some of the most difficult to fill across the state, and you'll see many districts with open CSN positions right now because of this. So a long lot of context there. If there's any questions about the overlap or how those things interplay, please feel free to ask.
Any further discussion?
Pardon the pun, but I think it's a Band-Aid.
It is. Please note too, I've learned a lot about our university level through this process. Illinois State has just opened what's called the Mennonite School of Nursing within ISU, specifically to support and create certified school nurses. And what it is, it's a non-master's degree seeking pathway to get licensure as a certified school nurse. Because what the state requires to get that license is less than a master's degree. It just requires specific classes. So ISU is one of the first universities in the state to offer just the classes and not push candidates towards a master's degree, which if you ask people who are considering it, current RNs, that kind of thing, that's been a barrier. I don't want a master's, I just want the license. So hopefully with this kind of model, more universities will be able to offer more programming to more candidates.
Have you approached COD's School of Nursing?
We have not, because they don't have the CSN component as not, they have the RN component, correct. And again, and that's part of the reason we're here asking for the registered nurse position, because if I can't say it's 100%, I won't say it's 100%, but I am highly confident we can fill that quickly versus the CSN position, which I am not highly confident in being able to fill quickly at all.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, so at this time, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves 1 FTE for a registered nurse for Kaneland High School.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
That passes 7-0. Okay, on to the 7th and final item of new business tonight. The continued discussion of the standards-based grading with possible action. Dr. Layden.
Yes, I'll start this. Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh are here to answer questions if there are questions from the board. Just a brief history reminder that this was brought up probably midsummer as a topic for future agenda. And so we planned October 11th for presentation, and a lot of data was shared there, a lot of information, survey information, academic information shared at the October 11th meeting. And at the end of that meeting, we moved on and went to another topic, but I do know that specifically Board Member Mankowski at 2 different times when was asking for this topic for future agenda, both times used the term sunset. And so that's why the possible action is on there for the board to see what additional questions that the board might have on the topic, and then see what questions, whether it's of myself or of Dr. Mum, Mr. Raleigh, to see that and see what questions that we have moving forward based on the fact that we have had this. We've probably had 5 or 6 now presentations on standards-based grading. We've had a lot of dialogue, survey information, clearly public comment. There's a lot of feedback and a lot of conversation on this, so wanted to bring it back to the board for any additional conversation, and then, as I mentioned, possible action based on the conversation. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the board to see what questions or comments that you have, or anything that you want to direct to either Mr. Raleigh or Dr. Mum.
Can you define what sunsetting means?
I would ask Board Member Mankowski, when you initially shared that,
Sure.
was there a timeline
Yeah.
with that? What were you?
Sunset review is standard procedure, at least the states I'm familiar with, that every so often programs are reevaluated as to effectiveness, efficacy, appropriateness, and if they are deemed to be appropriate and efficacious, effective, they are renewed. Otherwise, they are, from a regulatory or administrative point of view, they are allowed to sunset, and there's a review to, is there something else we could or should be doing? It's in the administrative code.
How do you reevaluate? Let me preface this. Like you said, we've had multiple meetings and we've received some information, but it's still not the information we're asking for. And so what does that look like? How do you do that part?
Based on the information that you've received, based upon the information we've received, has it improved student performance? Is it fair? And are there better options for grading in our district? That's what it comes down to. Does it improve student performance? Is it being administered fairly? And is it appropriate for our district? And have we given it I mean, we've been in it for 3-4 years now. And we are still, they're still subject to confusion. I'm hearing from constituents all the time. They're confused. Some students were hurt by it. They were hurt. Their college prospects or their college admission were damaged. And when we had a chance to go back and address it and do it, for whatever reason, this district chose not to. It is just not fair.
How do we quantitatively figure that out, qualitatively, whatever that looks like? Because, and I agree, even one student that their graduation, their
It's
future,
been more than one.
right? Well, that my point is that we have how many students we have. One student is too many, is my point. But we also have spent a lot of years, a lot of money, so there's like a financial, so to sunset its review, totally, I understand that part, but if we're at sunset, get rid of, where are we at? What does that look like? And if we're at sunset, get rid of, we need to be able to tell the community, this is why. Because we're gonna have community members that are going, well, you spent a lot of money, was there anything else you could have done? And we need to be able to speak that story. If we're willing to get rid of it, then we also need to tell the community, well, this is what we're replacing it, because as we know, our scores haven't always been great. So I don't think standard-based grading is necessarily, I think it highlighted that. I don't think it was the problem. Like, I think there's more underneath that we've got to deal with. So getting rid of standard-based grading is not going to change our scores, our current scores, because our teachers, our parents, what they're asking is for standard-based teaching, standard-based learning. So if this process we're using is not working, what is our next option?
Mr. Rowley, can you please, just questions. First of all, I want to clarify, as we have the conversation, are we talking about grades 6 through 12? I'm not trying to let Dr. Mum off the hook here, but just wanted to see what the conversations were because of the fact standards-based grading have been in the fabric of a district for almost 20 years now. Is it 6 through 8 that we're talking about, which has been the major shift as opposed to 6 through 12?
I would say 6 through 12.
Yeah, I would suppose 6 through 12.
Okay, well then I just want to make sure that I didn't leave Dr. Mum out for any of this conversation. So Mr. Rowley, with the work, if you recall, the last meeting was about, we were all here, so about 2 hours, data, feedback, survey results, all of that was very telling. But as Board Member Simmons, you asked for either more information or more in depth. Mr. Rowley, from your perspective, is there what other information can be gleaned? What other feedback can be gained? Was there anything in your review that you brought last time that was pretty intense? Is there anything else that's missing or that you still need more time to be able to do?
Not at this moment as far as academic data that we have. When we look at academic data that's available at the middle school, we look at our standardized testing. We look at then what we covered with our local assessments, so our day-to-day grading from our teachers that show up in means of A, B's, and C's on our report cards. At the high school, there's not as many standardized tests when we talk like fall, winter, and spring. I know we use the iReady benchmark when we presented last time. At the high school, our standardized tests look in terms of our SAT, our AP scores, and our AP tests. That's a little bit contingent on the students that want to take it. And then we look at our grade point averages. And again, that is our local data. So that is the assessments and grades that teachers are giving that manifest in a letter grade on the report card. So that is the bulk of the academic data that we have. We shared survey results. We've worked with individual grade level teams, departments to solicit feedback from our teachers. So in terms of academic impact, there's not a lot more information to provide that hasn't been shared. As far as the survey is concerned, the last presentation it was recapping some of the larger themes of that. I don't know if there are particular questions to those surveys. All of the questions were shared. From the respondents back to that survey, there was the vast majority, I would say, to those shared that it had a negative impact or it wasn't perceived positively. I don't know if we want to dig into that, but as far as further information, if there are specifics, I'd be happy to answer with what we have or what we know. But in general, to quantify the impact of this, those are the indicators that we've used through our administrator team, our leadership team, our cabinet discussions, really focused around those indicators that were presented last board meeting.
I'll just give my insight. I mean, I look back at the survey, I see that 80% of the parents disagreed with it. 60% of the students disagreed, were confused. I have it directly affected in my household. And like a gentleman mentioned back there, there was a student that did a petition and went around to the school, parents, everybody. I've heard on social media, I've heard through friends. There is such a disconnect, a disgust, anxiety, possibly depression from it. There has been worry about honor roll being taken away. There's absolutely no way that should even be a worry or a concern. I know there's teachers not on board with it, and if you have a majority to almost a super majority of individuals from staff, students, to parents that don't work with this program or struggling with this program, it's never going to work. It's almost like you have to have a majority of everybody together. And I've heard of flex block learning, there's other avenues, but I think it comes down to the teachers. And what, again, I'm just going to state is I didn't like that the teachers weren't surveyed on this. They were surveyed before a year ago, but they weren't surveyed recently because the program has changed. Their input is huge because they see what is directly working in the classroom and what is not. Can it work for some classes? Yes. I've heard from a teacher, SBG does not work for the social sciences or the humanities. It doesn't work for math and science? Absolutely. Absolutely, you can use that, and you can do the reassessments. Now, reassessment it's been around, but again, I have no problem with the teacher giving a test and a student struggles and says, hey, let's take the time and retake that test. Forget the grade, because if you're about learning the subject, the grade is unimportant. But there's just so many factors. I think the feedback from the teacher is the key. And when I say sunset, I'd say let's get rid of it at the very latest, the end of the year. Allow the teachers to determine what's going to work best for their class, for their students, but there has to be cohesion. Everybody's got to work together. It's got to be consistent. All we hear is frustration from the parents. I hear from my wife. It's just across the board. It may not just work for this district. Is it working for other districts? Absolutely. You know, there's a model or something that it could work, but this district, it's just not working. And my biggest concern is, we talked about the D's and F's, the inflation, the covering for the ones and the twos, that students don't even worry about a ones and a twos. There's a difference. I mean, there's a lot of factors in this, and it needs to be reexamined, looked in a different way. But I'm not saying like, let's shut it down tomorrow. We need insight from the teachers. We need to see what works best in the classroom and feedback, but SPG.
It comes down to this. Is it encouraging excellence on the part of all stakeholders in our district? And the clear feedback is no. And has it just been recently? No, we've been at this 3 years, 4 years, depending on how you count it, even longer in some cases.
Well, to your point, 2 years ago when we were coming out of trying to deal with that, we talked about, instead of launching it further, maybe holding back a little bit. And it was kind of like, the board at the time made the judgment of like, we can do both. we can do this both. We've got a plan and stuff like that. So the fact that, yeah, even that 2 years ago, we were kind of hesitating on it too, and to feel kind of what I'm getting from you is you're like, I just can't give you any other information to persuade you to say, we need to keep this, to Mr. Mankiski's point. So then that drive, that desire of like, we're going to fix this, we're going to pick it up, we're going to do what we need to is just not there. So sunsetting it and getting rid of it, like you said, by at the end of the year. My biggest question is, during this time, what are we going to replace it, or what are we going to do? Because like I texted Mr. President Gonzalez, the Illinois report cards came out, today. And if you pull Kaneland, our numbers aren't the greatest, and so again, I truly don't believe standard-based grading is our only reason for our scores to be where it has been. So what are we going to do as a plan moving forward to get that energy, like you're saying, that, we're going to get these scores back up, we're going to fight for this, and we're going to do. So that is my biggest just question from all this.
It's not the only reason, but it's inimical to a culture of excellence on the part of students, on the part of educators. I'm hearing nothing but frustration, having been in the classroom for 20 years. I'm hearing nothing but frustration from teachers in the application of it. And I'm not seeing any of the high-performing districts anywhere near us, not just in this state, but with teachers I speak with in other states, where this has been a part of high-performing districts. And Kaneland should be a high-performing district. I'm not willing to say that our students are any less than students anywhere else. In fact, I think they're even more.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've set up, and this standards-based grading, at least at the middle and high school level, is a part of allowing a culture of low expectation. I can take this any number of times. And on the same hand, we are putting a huge burden. And I've been in schools where it's been curriculum graded and standards-based graded, and it's a ton of additional work. SPG is a ton of additional work on the classroom teachers. And like Dr. Lane, like we discussed, there are so many demands, particularly if you're a classroom teacher in a special ed classroom or some of the more science, STEM classrooms. It's an additional burden that distracts from teaching and learning. I can draw no other conclusion. And at this point, I would move the question. Sunset at the end, the resolution would be to sunset standards-based grading at the end of this academic year, 23-24, and that it be replaced by curriculum-based grading in the meantime, unless the district leadership wants to come back to the board with a better plan. And I hate doing, I really don't, I am so angry that we have to do this. I hate micromanagers. I hate having to get us involved at this level when it's been out there for 3 years, and the communication with parents, the communication with students, there is no reason at all why any of that should be poor, but it is. And I am immensely disappointed.
Our role as a Board of Education is to be representative of the community, and I believe the community has spoken. You hear at all levels: students, teachers, parents. I feel like this has been forced, and I feel like it's incumbent upon us as a board to create that culture of excellence and set a high standard. And based on the feedback and the information that's been provided to us, I don't believe that this is the right avenue for achieving that. So I support the decision to sunset it. I don't want to do it haphazardly, and I wouldn't support it without a thoughtful process for what's coming forward. But the public has spoken. I've spoken to students. I have not found a single proponent for this.
More importantly, the data speaks.
The,
By every objective standard, by our test scores, school report, and not just grades. I'm looking at objective external measures, our Gates-McGinty's, our whatever standardized test you choose. I'm just not, and I know there's a number of other factors involved. I get that. I was in a classroom for 20 years. I know what it's about. And this alone is not the reason. But this combined with everything else is not conducive to a culture of excellence, which is what this district desperately needs. And we need to provide that support and develop that culture moving forward. Just my 2 cents.
It seems as though it's diverting focus from other improvements we could make to the curriculum. I've sat here, every public comment I've seen, I know people are more likely to critique than acclaim, but I don't believe I've seen a single community member take the initiative to go up and support the standards-based grading and say that, oh, I understand this, it's great, I'm glad you implemented all of this. Every time it seems as though it's a bi-weekly occurrence that 1 or 2 community members with the initiative to come here and speak to the board have said that either them or their child has seen some confusion, and it's led to a distraction from their schoolwork.
And to your point, Mr. Cook, it's confusion.
Yeah.
Rather than the underlying theme of excellence, this is just confusion is endemic now. Students don't know, and parents of students don't know where they stand. And are we seeing any improvement by objective measures?
Yes.
Is this moving Kaneland closer to becoming a high performing district? I have to answer no. I listened to I went through the data. I looked externally.
Yeah.
I looked at, and what other districts have been doing? High performing, non-high performing, both public and private. Yeah. I call the question.
So at this point, Board Member Mankivsky has called the question, which essentially means no further discussion. We vote on it at that point, as I understand it. Is that correct?
I just want to make sure that if there's anybody we've not heard from before, and I respect the fact that somebody'd like to make a motion, but I just want to make sure if there's anybody that we've not heard from that would like to share.
I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I think we've all said it. It's been said multiple times in multiple different ways, so I don't have much more to add to that. From a cost perspective, if we did spend a lot of money on this and we didn't implement it the correct way, we were not fiscally responsible with how we implemented this whole thing, maybe there's a little bit of cost savings we can look forward to in the near future, if there is that. And I don't know if that's some data we can get back down the line, but the fact of the matter is, I mean, it's all pretty black and white at this point. So.
Anything else?
Would there be any cost, I don't know if Dr. Fuchs or Mr. Raleigh, to reverting back to it or changing to a different system? Or I know you wouldn't have.
Mr. Raleigh, if indeed we move forward with this direction, and if we go back to a traditional grading scale, we go back to some of the other things that were in place prior to standards-based grading being fully implemented, what would some of those steps look like, or what might the cost be, the time factor, any of that other feedback you can share?
Sure. The costs, I don't imagine there would be much cost savings. The grading system, the school information system that we have is compatible with a traditional grading system or a standards-based grading system, which would be Infinite Campus. So that is purchased for that. We have to have that. So that is how we submit our grades to the state. As far as dollars spent on training, that's a little bit muddy picture because that time happens on contract time through teacher professional development. It would happen on some of our school improvement days where teachers are in different sessions, and a lot of that is wrapped into this idea of standards-based teaching or standards-based learning, where that is looking at how standards break down and what concepts need to be taught. What does it look like to be proficient in these areas? What does it mean when a kid is successful or when they're not? And that time is built into a teacher's plan time where they're having those discussions. So they're going and they're teaching to a set of standards, they're collecting student work samples, and then they're coming together to discuss what that looks like. So that human capital, a lot of that is built into our
That should
day.
be happening in their PLC meetings
Correct.
anyways.
Correct.
I mean, in the non-SBG graded schools in which I taught, we always had PLC meetings where that was very much discussed as part of it. So that's going to happen regardless.
Correct. That and those conversations are ongoing. We don't have any standards-based external systems consultants. We don't have money that we spend on that as a district. So as far as recouping costs, I don't think we would see anything that is a significant impact to a budget outside of if we've had teachers that go to conferences. We don't have a lot of very direct and specific standards-based conferences that our teachers are going to. Some of the site visits that we've done, just from a PLC or professional growth standpoint, have been to districts that are standards-based grading, and that is involved in some of those conversations, but there's not a lot of external opportunities and a lot of external expenses that are associated with this. So if we were to go to a different system, most of those costs are already accounted for.
Okay, so as I understand it, at this time, I will entertain a motion to sunset the standards-based grading system at the end of the 23-24 school year, and give administration direction
For grades 6 through 12.
forgive me, for
Sorry,
grades 6
I
through
wanted to
12. Forgive me.
clarify.
No, you're correct. Grades 6 through 12, and direct administration to come up with a timeline and a strategy for implementing a curriculum-based grading system. I'll entertain a motion
So moved.
Second.
and a roll call, please.
Mrs. Simmons,
Aye.
Mr. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. McCauley,
Aye.
Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky,
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Okay, that concludes new business for this evening. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and move forward with the superintendent and board report. And I will turn it over to Dr. Layden.
Yep, thank you. We have parent-teacher conferences at the end of this week. So Wednesday after school, as most of you know, you can check your students' websites, check their school information that has come out. Wednesday nights, all day Thursday, and as a result, there's no school for students on Thursday or Friday this week due to conferences, which I'm sure that's a good thing. They'll love that. The next thing I wanted to ask about or share is that based on feedback from CAC at CAC's meeting and also from emails that I received back, it looks like December 14th will be the better date of the two. So I will, excuse me, send something out to CAC and then we can shift and we can talk about the topics we'll put on that date. And then the last thing that I had also was from the Board of Education, one of the topics for future agenda, really not an agenda, but a topic of interest, was building tours and to be able to go and visit tours. And sorry, Ryan stepped out. I believe it was Ryan's topic that he had shared. And the feedback that I heard back from the board was really only something during the day, just so board members, if they're available or would like to, they could get into the buildings. Because the evening athletic events, evening activities, Hall of Fame, plays, conferences, those things, anybody can go to at any time. So from what Board Member Kleisner shared was during the day. So what I'm happy to do is work with our principals and build it, but I'm struggling with I'm grappling with, do we pick this date or that date and open up, talk with Mr. Faulkner and say harder January 5th from 1 to 3, and if you're available, you can come. Find one at an elementary, find one at the high school. Is that what the board's looking for? And I don't think we can tailor it to all of your individual schedules, because I know some of you have flexibility during the day, some of you may not. Is from Mr. Kleisner, Board Member Kleisner, is that what the rest of you are looking for as well? Because that's his feedback, and I hate to talk now. He's going to come back and watch the video and see what we talked about in the whole time. But
Well, no, the building tour that we had after the CAC was immensely helpful.
Okay.
In getting a grip on Harder, what Harder has
Yeah.
to offer, how we can, assist in the mission of Harder, and support for the program. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to see that at the high school and at most, if not all, the elementary schools.
But I think what Mr. Kleisner talked about was during the day as opposed
Yeah.
to evening visits, because evening
Yeah.
visits we do. So you're still looking for day activities?
Yeah.
We're talking about the building tours.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
during the day.
Yeah, during the school day.
Okay, because the evenings you're all always welcome to come, but during the day?
Yeah, that'd be really, I think it'd be interesting to kind of see what's going on day to day. Nothing special, doesn't have to be, an assembly or something like that. And, no pressure, nothing, not like we're going to be auditing and taking notes and anything like that, but just kind of hanging out with the principals, meeting some teachers, talking to some students, just kind of getting a lay of the land and seeing what it's like.
And I think then you just setting up the dates, see what works best with the school, and then if we can work with that.
Okay,
Rather
maybe I'll
than-
send an invite out to
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah,
in
rather than
RSVP
try
so
to
they would
figure
know.
out everybody's timeline and work schedule and stuff.
Like I said, we don't want to impose, but we do want to be more part of.
Yeah, my goal from this would be to connect with communities that I don't have direct connections with right now. So like McDowell
Yeah.
or Sugar Grove, John Shields, just to.
Outside of your home school.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I see people at John Stewart, but I don't get to connect with those other communities. So that would be my goal for this.
We'll make sure it's a special day at the cafeteria. Steak and lobster? Oh, no. Good.
That was all I had for the superintendent report. Thank you. I'll get that, we'll to the principals and I'll get some dates out to the board.
Okay, Dr. Fuchs.
I don't have any updates tonight, thank you.
Okay. Well, so then we'll move forward with topics for future agendas. Oh, I'm sorry, Katie. You waited all this time.
So much for cheap, right? Did about our time limit.
Yeah.
30 minutes.
She's like, it's okay.
Good evening. I would like to first start off by saying happy Halloween Eve. This week is only a 3-day week for students, as Dr. Layden mentioned that students and parents have conferences on Wednesday after school and Thursday. Over the weekend, Kaneland High School had its fall play perfumery with a total of 3 showings. For sports updates, varsity football beat Montini 2-0, making them the 2023 regional champions. Tonight, they play St. Lawrence for sectionals at Evergreen Park High School. For the varsity football team, they played Riverside Brookfield and beat them 56-20. Boys cross country placed second with a total of 105 points, and both boys and girls cross country will be racing at the state finals. Boys bowling will also play at Mardi Gras Lanes for the Sycamore Kickoff Classic on November 4th. Unfortunately for us, boys varsity soccer fell to Boylan Catholic 5-0, and girls freshman volleyball fell to Sycamore 1-0. Student Council is hosting a Veterans Day breakfast on Friday, November 10th, with veteran family members of students invited to the breakfast along with other family members. For upcoming dates, picture retakes at the high school is 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. in the Black Box Theater on November 14th. Also, for seniors, reminder that the deadline for ordering caps and gowns is November 27th. And up later in this month is students' Thanksgiving break from November 20th to November 24th. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Okay. Well, at this point, we'll move forward to topics for future agendas. Is there anything that anyone would like to add at this time?
I wanted to just add about the Illinois report card that came out. If either data can be presented to us over because I pulled up the report, it's 200 pages. And I would rather have people that are more educated on this to teach me versus me reading it. Especially, I've looked at it before, but new board members too. I don't know if you might appreciate more understanding behind it and see what our numbers have been, not just for this year, but the last couple of years.
It's a good segue. We actually have that on the agenda for November 30th.
Reading your mind.
Indicators of success and report card will be reported out to the board on that meeting.
All right. Perfect.
I would like to have the transition fair back on the agenda and see where we are on that, as well as Ag Night. Here I've been in touch with Kane and DeKalb Farm Bureaus. They're very enthusiastic about participating. In fact, our parking lots can handle it. They wanted to bring equipment for real life. So, just, interesting stuff. I'm thinking more towards late winter, early spring for Ag Night, but can we talk about that going forward? It's reaching out, and also I've talked to a couple of the nursery companies. I don't think they're in our Kaneland. I think they're in Central, but they were more than interested in participating.
So I have an idea. It's more of a stream of consciousness than it's going to be anything else. So bear with me. But I liked what happened at CAC. I think this was a pretty positive experience. I would like to somehow create more of that opportunity. However, I'm reluctant on taking CAC's time for that, right? Like, I think they have important work to do as well. So I was wondering if the board or we were interested in somehow creating more of those opportunities. And I think structured it almost exactly like it was structured that night. I thought it was a fairly positive night. And we were able to separate out enough of us so that we didn't get in trouble for all of that.
Yeah, thank you to David for helping to put that together, and Dr. Layden. But I think an opportunity for that to piggyback is the referendum. So we have at least a topic, because we'll have to have a topic or a focus for these things.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we can start with that format. And I agree wholeheartedly. One of our goals is to connect with the community more, and we found a nice avenue. So
Yeah, that worked well.
yeah.
So I don't know who does the organizing of those, how that works now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other topics? No? Okay. At this point, we'll move forward to round 2 of public comments, and we have one person signed up at this time. So, again, keeping in mind the provisions I laid out earlier for public comment, I will call Mr. Stalkup up to the mic.
Hi, Scott Stolkup, 3 in the district from Sugar Grove. Thank you for the action that you took, and I hopefully in the timeline that administration comes back with, if we already have all the information already at hand and ready to implement, because not everybody has switched over as of yet, maybe it can be even quicker than the end of the school year. But I acknowledge the need to make sure that the teachers have fair timing, etc. But if we're already there, then maybe it can be even quicker than that. The real reason I wanted to speak in this one was on the slide that Dr. Fuchs put up about the operating expense per pupil was $17,783, the second most of all the districts presented. My question that I'm kind of curious in is, what is that for an elementary student? Because I realize this is an average for all of our kids against our whole average. So what does that look like for an elementary student versus for a middle school versus a high school versus the academy? I think that would be an important evaluation to know on how that divides out. Are we spending, 12,000 on this group of students and 20,000 on that group of students, just to cross equity across the district? I think that would be a very important metric or measure to know. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stalkup. So at this point, I'll open it up to anyone else who might want to come and speak at this time. All right, with no further public comments, we'll proceed with closed session. The board is scheduled for closed session to discuss the Illinois Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1, Section 2C2, and then I add the new one, right? And 5 ILCS 122C9. Where there will be no action taken following the session. Therefore, after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. At this time, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss Section 2C1, 2C2, and ILCS 120-2C9 at 9:30 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner,
Aye.